Nils, thanks for joining.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. So today we're going to be talking about prototyping and ways to get to a prototype. So first thing I want to talk about is tooling, because a lot of people love to talk about tools. It's super fun to talk about. And there's a lot of different tools out there that you can choose from. I mean, you can even do paper prototypes and things like that, right? But obviously, probably more for people that are looking for investors and do some testing. They want something a little bit more polished. What are some of your suggestions in your experience?
Figma is great. Adobe makes some really good prototyping tools. We use Envision a lot just because we're used to using it. But tools are getting amazing.
There's a million of them.
Yeah, and they're always enhancing them. So
yeah, there's a lot of different tools. There's online, like in-browser tools and all those different things. But for Envision, why do you find like that's easier? I think it's really good for sharing, right? Obviously,
yeah. And I'm assuming they all are. It just happens to be the tooling that we use, right? But all of these tools are shareable. I mean, the links are shareable. They're all building in developer tools as well, which is a fairly new thing, and that's super helpful for
when you leave the prototype and you go to the actual build phase.
Exactly. I mean, the developers can click on different elements and things and get CSS attributes, pixel sizes, fonts, all that stuff.
Right.
Very,
so it's not like before when you would just hand over a PDF and be like.
Before it was generally a tool for designers. Now it's
blending.
It's blending.
Great. So with that, let's talk about what we do with that tool once we've got it in our hands now. So we've built the prototype, we've used the tools to get us there, and now we want to show it off to folks. Obviously one of the reasons why a founder wants a prototype in our experience is for possible investors, right, to gather.
Yeah, absolutely.
knowledge.
I mean, what I would say is it's always better to have something that looks and feels like the actual product than a deck or something like that.
Right, because earlier on in the strategy phase, a lot of times you might have a couple of screens to just kind of communicate the idea, but you can't really communicate the journey somebody would go on, right?
It sounds silly, but a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Right.
I mean, this is literally a bunch of pictures. I mean, it really feels like the real thing. So getting stakeholders on board, potential investors, all of those things. I mean, they can really see what this thing is going to be like when it's launched.
Because they can actually try it out. They can actually like experience it either on their mobile device or on a laptop.
And a prototype is not a prototype, right? I mean, you have to do it right. You have to tell the story. You obviously can't add everything. You can't add every single thing that the application is going to have.
Right.
And it's all fake data. But you should be able to, at least the main workflows should be pretty robust. And then different elements like modals and drop-downs and things like that.
Yeah.
Maybe a few of those sprinkled in.
And then with that, then the thing we like to talk about is the moments people have within it. So not just, I think that's the difference with a prototype versus some screens, is you can really get an idea of like when somebody solves a problem in that workflow, right?
Absolutely. And if you're there observing that, I mean, that's the best way to do it, right? If you're in the room with the people testing it, not only can you walk them through it, which they still need to be walked through a little bit, because a prototype you can get down a rabbit hole. Yeah. Right? I mean, they're just hot spots that link to other images. So if you're there to kind of help them through that, and then also gauge their reaction, right? And then take notes while you're doing it.
Yeah, and with that, I think that's a good segue into kind of the metrics side of it, is that so you've got the prototype and you've got your workflows kind of set out, and now you're doing some testing with some people, or just like I said, gathering some feedback in general. There's a lot of different ways to do that. You mentioned one is like actually being in the room while they're using it, but I think you can also set up ways to track eyeballs. You can do a number of different ways to get those metrics. The thing that I see founders struggling with is they usually just take that in the room feedback, and then it kind of turns into anecdotal sort of conversation. And I think it's really important that people really try to structure that test when they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, be prepared, right?
Yep.
Have questions prepared. keep it somewhat short. You don't want to spend 2 hours in that room and fatigue everyone.
Right.
The other thing I would say is you want to get that done before you show it to potential investors. Right. Get the users on it. Revise it. Change it. Make it better. Strip things out. Whatever you need to do. And then I would even recommend, if you're going to be shopping this around to investors, make a shortened version of it, right? There's no way a potential, people are busy.
Yeah.
You don't want to have
them go through all the sign-up process and the registering.
Do a mini workflow.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a really good advice, because I've seen ones where they make maybe a person go through the entire registration process and workflow and everything, like to sign up for the service. When you don't need to, you're just trying to find out, does this solve your problem?
You're going to lose them. And generally, they're just going to want to see how the general look and feel is and what problem you're solving. So a mini workflow for investors, something like that. So an additional prototype is a really good idea.
That makes sense. So with the metric side of things, one of the other things that I've seen is that, people don't use the data that they pull out of it. Like I said, they can pull some anecdotal things and stuff, but getting that information from those tests and those things, and then being able to synthesize it somewhere, right? To be able to say, now we can actually make decisions on this data that we've pulled.
Absolutely. Use that data for investors or for key stakeholders, right? Like this is what we presented everyone, and these are our findings. This is what we've changed based on those findings, or this is what we're proposing to change. Yeah. The prototype is like, it's the single source of truth that you can change.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing, because everyone knows, everyone's on the same page. The stakeholders are on the same page, investors, your team, development team. Everybody knows now what success looked like because they've touched it. Absolutely.
And so with that, the next phase is that it would transition into development. And so what are some things that you've seen important in a prototype to get it ready to hand off to the development team to be a part of?
Well, again, the nice thing about the modern tools are that they package everything. So when you build a prototype in programs like Envision and Figma and things like that, they package all the assets as well. So you have a style guide that you can click on and see the color palette. Back in the day, you used to have to make like a PDF that took a long time. I mean, you'd spend time in Illustrator making boxes with colors and hex values.
The whole style guide and everything.
Yeah, now this is literally the developers can click and see those hex values. It's very useful. And the other thing is you can do things like animations, right? So let's say there's a loading element for a screen. You can literally show that in the prototype. So they're getting better and better. Pretty soon you're not even going to have to build an app.
Yeah, right.
Prototype.
Just prototype. It's constantly prototyping. Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I like about, especially the way that we work, and I think has been very successful, not only for us, but a lot of our clients too, is that having the development team be a part of the design phase, the prototyping phase. I know I said handoff earlier, but try to avoid it being a big handoff, right? Has that been
Bring them in early. That's highly recommended. Have everyone participate in that. And not only, when you get to where you think you can start developing it, continue to make improvements on it as you're doing that. Things can change. It's not in stone. Right. I always tell the development team here that if you see something that's wrong, don't take our design as like the golden rule. Like if something seems wrong, tell us. Yeah. And then we'll either say, well, this is why we did it, or we missed that. So thanks for bringing that up. I mean, they're all part of the design team. Everyone is.
Well, I think that's what key thing you just said there, which is why. That if the developer and the development team is in there early during the strategy and the prototyping, they're really going to understand why. So when they're making those decisions minute by minute as they're building stuff, they can do it confidently, even though maybe the prototype doesn't answer every question.
Yeah, they remember back to when we first saw it, and I remember that element.
And I know why they made these decisions, right?
Yep. And again, you can't build everything into the prototype. No. So open communication is incredibly important, even with a really robust prototype.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me today, Nils.
You're welcome. Always fun to talk about design.
It is super fun.